Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live stream, our final episode for 2022, and an amazing episode we've got on for you guys tonight indeed. Special guest Daren Yoong will be joining us tonight as well. But first of all, I just wanted to introduce everyone on the show tonight, our regulars, of course, and a very warm welcome as well to our regulars. Joining us on the live chat, our regular guests, and as well, if you're watching on replay, hello there. Nice of you to join us, and also a special welcome if you're listening to us on podcast as well. We've been broadcasting all the episodes on podcast this year too, so I hope you're enjoying that as well. And to kick things off, let's welcome our regular guests, Riz and Rahul. Gentlemen, nice of you to join us as always for the final show of 2022.
Hey Tom, hey Rahul, good to be here. Final show. It's been a good run.
I couldn't have said it better, Riz. Evening, Tom. Evening, Riz. Yeah, what a wonderful, amazing year for EVs it has been in Australia, 2022, and yeah, can't wait to start again in 2023 with a new pair of runners, Riz.
That's it, and what better way but to get inspiration from Singapore and what's going on there tonight.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better, gents, and I just want to thank both of you publicly for all your help this year. We couldn't have done these streams without you. Riz with your charts, Rahul with your articles that you share behind the scenes. These guys do a lot of work for us, so thank you to both of you. And looking forward to a 2023 and beyond. I feel like 2022 we've turned a corner in Australia. It just feels good. The enthusiasm is there. I think the conversations are good in the community for EVs. I want to give a special shout out to the members who have supported as well us over the year, and a special shout out tonight to all our long range members. I'll give you guys a shout. Brett Stone, Paul Elliott, Mohan Singham, Antti Sincline, Nitnyats Stitches, Kenny Timms, Harrison Kwa, Peter V, and Charles Gregory, of course. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for supporting us. And I want to actually give a special shout out to friends of mine, Rob and Sally, and this is Sydney EV, Rob's Twitter handle. He's been documenting their trip across Australia. I believe they're going to be driving from Sydney all the way to Perth across the Outback and Nullarbor. So an amazing journey there in their Model 3, and this is them in the town of Kimber. So make sure you follow Sydney EV on Twitter to follow that journey. Looks amazing, great pictures there for sure. And as always, want to thank our live stream partners, Jawa, Hansho, and EVSC. Make sure you check out those coupon codes in the video description below for your discounts for Tesla accessories and chargers and all things EVs from those three suppliers. And our accessory of the week is, of course, the Jawa right-hand drive all-weather floor liners for Model Y. So check those out. Free delivery for anything over $120 in your order. And I'll leave that link in the video description below as always. And coming up tonight, interview with my good friend Daren Yoong from Singapore, who's a YouTuber, talks all things Teslas and of course Tesla investment. Looking forward to that part. And then we'll go through our usual segments, new EV sales, DC charging news, EV charging eye candy, Tesla, BYD and other EV news. All right, without further ado, let's introduce the man himself, Daren Yoong. Hey, Daren, nice of you to join us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Dialing in from the land of chili crab.
Oh.
And hopefully, you'll be known for a little bit more EVs in the near future.
My goodness,
how many guests have you had from Singapore?
You know what, Daren, you are actually our very first guest from Singapore. So welcome. And man, you just made me very hungry there thinking about chili crab. So, yep, well done. Daren tonight is going to talk to us about, of course, EV adoption in Singapore. That country has done very well in the last 12 months, as Daren will share with us. But before we do that, I just want to thank Jez Kemp, who's just donated $5.42. He says, I'm donating towards a private investigator to track down Tom's missing Model Y. Missing in action. At Riz Akhtar, a grey background. Come on, bro. Oh, gosh. Riz, how do you respond to that?
I've got to step my game up. Now, Jez's funds have been, I know he's sort of trying to put a lot into your garage to ensure that the blue Model Y Performance has a space. But obviously, I've got to do something about my background. So give me a bit of time, Jez, over Christmas. Everyone else got a Christmas tree. I'll try and spruce up my grey background.
Look forward to 2023s with Riz's background. All right, Daren. Well, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself to start with? You know, how you got into YouTubing Teslas and EVs, and what's your story with EVs in Singapore?
Happy to. I'm originally from Malaysia. Singapore is a country of migrants. I moved to Singapore 16 years ago. Found my career here. Found my love. My family is here right now. I've got a young daughter. And I work in tech. Now, in the middle of COVID, all of us realized that we suddenly had a lot more free time. So people pursue new, different hobbies. Now, I did not begin by thinking I wanted to create a YouTube channel. The story was actually even more strange. I joined a coaching program to be a coach. And in the coaching program, they asked me, what's my mission? What's your life dream? And I said, I want to try to be a lighthouse for economic opportunity for people. And they asked, okay, how are you going to bring that to life? I said, if I was coaching people one-to-one, how many lives am I touching? A small number. Why don't I start a YouTube channel? And I thought that was the end of it. We closed the coaching program. I got a WhatsApp chat, and they messaged me a few weeks later, Daren, what's the link to your YouTube channel? And I go, oh, okay, this is real now. I have to commit. There are a couple of people following up with me. And that's how I started this YouTube channel. At first, so my channel is about investing, but because majority of my investments are on Tesla, I believe as an investor, it's very helpful to understand the products and services that the companies produce, talk to the users, to the employees. And that's how I got to spend a lot of time with the Tesla community. I've been working on this YouTube channel for a year and 4 months. And I've had the pleasure to meet Tom in Singapore 2 months ago. It was a real joy.
No, the pleasure was all mine, Daren. It was great to meet you as well in Singapore, and you shouted us really good coffee there too.
Yes.
So Daren, I want to ask you, what came first, buying the Teslas or TSLA investment? Which one?
That's a meme nowadays. It used to be, if you buy TSLA, you could afford many more Teslas. But if we look at the financial markets the past 18 months, the opposite is true. If you bought a Tesla, it actually appreciates in value at times, whereas TSLA, most of the market is down for most of us. So for me, I bought into Tesla in 2020. That was a time of the meteoric rise. So I'm not down as much compared to someone who's new right now. I am though planning to get a Tesla, but it's been a huge tension. If I was in Australia, I would be getting a Tesla instantly. One of the topics we'll talk about is Singapore is the world's most expensive car prices, 3 times higher than US price. So if you want to buy a performance Model Y, which Tom is receiving, guess how much it costs here?
Oh, Riz, you go first.
I think a Model 3 rear-wheel drive, 130,000 Australian dollars.
Higher.
Oh, you're next.
150.
Higher.
Okay,
Wow.
I've got some inside knowledge here, Daren, but I'm still still guessing here. So maybe 250,000.
250 Australian for a Model 3 rear-wheel drive.
Oh, we're talking Model 3. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Then that's pretty close. If it's a Model Y performance like Tom's one, it's 300,000 Sing dollars, or you multiply 1.1, it's 330,000 Australian dollars.
Wow.
It's insane. That's the price of a car here in Singapore. So when someone asks, why don't I get a Tesla? That's my reason why. I can see the calculations happening in everyone's eyes here now.
I mean, what is the reason for that? Why are cars so expensive in Singapore?
It's government policy. Singapore government has a core mandate of actually reducing the car population, not even maintaining, but they want to eventually reduce the car population. They want it to be a car light society. So what's unique about Singapore is that there isn't a direct incentive to get people to buy EVs. The government doesn't need to do it because it goes against their first primary goal of reducing car usage. We're a very small island nation. Riz Rahul, have you got a chance to visit Singapore recently?
No,
Yeah,
not
I have,
recently, but
yes.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Rahul, you have, yes. Riz, not yet.
Yes.
Very small island nation, public transport is amazing, it's reliable, it works. You find a train station about 5-7 minutes anywhere, and more train stations are coming up. So in that context, when you buy a car in Singapore, 2/3 of what you're paying, like if you're buying a Model Y Performance for 330,000 Australian dollars, 2/3 of it goes to government taxes. Tesla only gets like 100,000.
Wow. Okay. So it's a form of control by the government because they don't want too many cars on the island, obviously.
Exactly. They can afford to pull it off because the public transport is genuinely good. It is not perfect. Breakdowns do happen from time to time. It can be congested in rush hour. If you've seen pictures of Tokyo, Singapore is not that bad during rush hour, but it's not always the most comfortable. If you are time constrained, you need to get somewhere in half an hour, you can't always rely on public transport. But with that said, it is one of the best in the world.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that, having been there a few times. Before I ask Daren any more questions, I mean, I'm not sure if this is the Elon Musk, but certainly someone called Elon Musk is congratulating us on a fantastic year, Riz and Rahul. So looking forward to our progress in 2023. Thanks, Elon. Great to hear from you.
I think Nash has pulled up the big guns for the final show.
Thanks, Nash. And yeah, Gaffer's saying, I only get to see Singapore from the airport. I'd like to leave it sometime and see the place. Yeah, highly recommend that, Gaffer. Go out and check it out. It's a really good place for a holiday and a quick stop. Now, Daren, I've been looking at your stats in Singapore. In the last 2 years, you've gone from less than 1% of EV adoption to now you're in double digits, if I'm not wrong.
That is correct. So Singapore's EV adoption has risen very quickly. Now, I want to paint some context on this story as well. It's not as straightforward. It's not like the government had a grand plan, grand vision, and executed on EV adoption perfectly. In fact, a few years ago, one of the ministers in Singapore actually commented about Tesla, saying that Teslas are a lifestyle product. You don't need EVs, just take public transport. So the government was not always supportive of EVs. A decade ago, the government was actually looking at other alternatives like hydrogen and also compressed natural gas. I believe some of our countries, some of governments were looking at those same ones as well. Even today, some governments are still looking at hydrogen as an alternative. What's happened since then is, as the government realized that EV adoption is here to stay, they look at UK, US, China. It's reached a point where the government's now allowing it to happen. Tesla was actually in Singapore more than 10 years ago because Tesla thought Singapore is kind of like the Wakanda of Earth. It's so modern, it's so small, it's easy to control. Shouldn't that be one of the first countries in the world to adopt EVs? Unfortunately for Tesla, they found out 10 years ago that was not the case. They didn't receive much support, so much so that Tesla actually exited Singapore 10 years ago. Have you even heard of Tesla exiting any country in the world?
Yeah, not off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, I remember 10 years ago Tesla being there, but yeah, it was very quiet. I think one gentleman imported it from Hong Kong or something like that.
It's correct, Joe Nguyen. So he was one of the first Tesla owners in Singapore, and even then he had to pay like an additional carbon tax for his Tesla because that's how they rated it. They said that electricity came from non-renewable sources, and so he had to pay extra tax because it's using more electricity. So it was quite a tough journey back then. Singapore had all the right ingredients to be an EV first country, but it didn't start that way. Then, as the situation changed, Tesla re-entered Singapore 18 months ago. When Tesla re-entered Singapore, I think that really put Tesla EVs and Tesla at the top of the map, because if you ask most Singaporeans, the perception of EVs are those very golf cart kind of EVs. We've got a ride-hailing EV sharing scheme like Blue SG. They've done a great job in just educating people, letting people be exposed to EVs, but they were not like the most powerful cars. There's no instant torque that you're going to find like in the Tesla with the kind of power capacity, the kind of comfort, the kind of smart and intelligence. The Tesla is really like an iPhone in a world of Nokias, as all of us here know. So when that happened, we've then seen EV adoption go from 0.3% 2 years ago, basically non-existent, to about 3.8% last year. It's really good growth. This year to date, with latest October data, we are at 16% EV adoption. From what I've researched so far, that's the highest in Asia Pacific outside of Greater China. But again, this was not an easy journey.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, by the way. Congratulations to Singapore for reaching that double digits in 2 years. What did the government do exactly? How did they incentivize or encourage that uptake?
While the government wants to reduce car ownership, they realized that it was important to also incentivize EVs because they know that private car ownership isn't going to go to zero. It's going to be a non-zero number. It's not going to be zero. And they'd rather have EVs on the road rather than ICE cars. The context here is for Singapore as an island nation, sustainability is not a nice to have. It's existential. If the ocean level rises beyond a certain amount, there is no Singapore. So like, if you've been to Singapore before, it's mostly flat. We don't have mountains. If there's a flood, everything's gone. So because of that, because it's accidental, the government's really put in $45,000 worth of EV incentive. But again, the taxes are so high that 45,000 sounds like a lot. It's not that much. 45,000 in the context of a $330,000 Model Y is about 12-13%. So that's some context there. Then I think the bigger one is the government saying they're phasing out all new ICE car sales by 2030. Huge. That means whether you like it or not, you're not going to be able to buy an ICE car. Then they've actually helped nurture the EV charging network. There's around 3,000 EV chargers now. But Singapore's population is only 5.7 million people. We only have 650,000 cars. So very small market. And we're going to get the government's committed to 60,000 EV chargers by 2030. So per capita, if you look at population and cars on the road, it's by far the highest in Southeast Asia, even today, not even looking at 2030. So that's help from the government side.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Good to see the government pitching in there. And my understanding too is that the taxes you actually purchase a lease of such for your car. So when you say no new car sales that are ICE by 2030, people change cars every 10 years, right? So effectively, you might actually get close to 100% EV adoption on the roads.
Exactly. So by 2040, there literally isn't any ICE car in the country. Zero. Like you can't keep a car for 20, 30 years. There is a way to renew the 10-year license, but it wouldn't make sense unless you're enthusiast. You want to keep those old 1960 cars. Beyond those few very niche, there are not going to be any more ICE cars in the country.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's the Norway of Asia, really. Singapore in 2040. All I can say to that is Wakanda forever. That's fantastic.
That license that Tom brought up for the international audience, Singapore calls it a certificate of entitlement. It's basically like a form that says, Riz Rahul, you are entitled to own a car, not for 30 years, but for 10 years in this country. That means your depreciation is max 10 years. And the way it works is there are two main categories in Singapore. There's category A and category B. It's split by power rating. So for ICE cars, it's a certain CC. For EVs, it's below 110 kilowatts for category A and above 110 kilowatts for category B. All Teslas, as you know, even the Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive is above 200 kilowatts. The market of cars in Singapore of 650,000 is split 50-50 between A and B. That means Tesla is actually only effectively competing in half of Singapore's car market. And that's been a big pain point for Tesla and also broader EV adoption. Because the reason why they split by power rating is in the past, they thought that the more powerful a car, the more luxurious it is. Therefore, we tax more. Made sense in the past. But right now, Teslas are not just more powerful, they're also more efficient. It is almost like the government saying, Tom, you bought an M1 MacBook Pro because it's so powerful, we're going to tax you more, Tom, even though it's using less electricity.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't quite make sense, but yeah, I can see why the government initially probably made that rule. But yes, now you've got more efficient vehicles like Tesla for sure. I mean, so if not everybody can afford a car, I guess one good benefit of this is that, the ride-sharing cars, taxis will be electric as well moving forward.
Exactly. The benefit there is it's giving people who've never tried an EV before a first-hand experience. I really believe that ride-hailing public transport is a great first exposure to most of the general population to adopt EVs. It's not yet fully mainstream here. There's still a lot of education needed. EVs are very new. Again, 2 years ago, EV adoption was only 0.3%. People still have questions like, can you charge an EV in the rain? what happens if it goes through flood waters? That is very, very common. Or will EV catch fire? What happens to the battery? Do I need to change it every year? So a lot of like foundational education needed in Singapore. Curious, what's the situation like in Australia?
Yeah, look, those questions, they still crop up, by the way, in Australia. But we can see the education side is starting to pick up. I think the media is starting to produce positive stories. I mean, Riz does write for The Driven too. So, Riz, I might get your opinion on this as well. Like, what are you hearing on the ground?
I think with certain audience, particularly those that are well researched, they've got a pretty good idea, or they talk to people. But there is quite a majority of the traditional family car buyers, which I often run into at expos where we're showcasing EVs and just you're doing a bit of education run around what EV is all about. It's very common, as you said, Daren, how long will the battery last? So slowly we're working towards demystifying or myth busting those areas around EVs. But the best way to convince people, as we saw with the iPhones or smartphones, is for them to see someone they trust have one, or it's not that scary anymore, and then try it and get one themselves. So we are one of the more affordable EV markets in the world. Nothing like Singapore as such, but even then, there's still a lot of incentives that are being put out there to help or assist with EV adoption and get rid of some of those myths around them.
I just want to put up this comment by Peter Cook. By the way, Daren, Peter Cook is one of our resident guests and members who is actually an Uber driver for a Model 3 here in Sydney or New South Wales. He says, my Uber rides are less argumentative these days, but many of the questions that he gets asked remain really basic. I'm sure very similar to what you said, Daren. Daren, I want to ask you, in Australia, a lot of the negative vibes around EVs is range anxiety because we're such a big country. That comes up a lot, we can't get around our big states. Obviously Singapore, you can fit, I don't know how many Singapores you can fit in Australia, but that's probably not an issue, range anxiety in Singapore, I'd imagine.
The country is 50 kilometers coast to coast, if you want to call it that. 50 kilometers. There's no Sydney to Perth drive equivalent. If you did that, you're done in half an hour here.
Jeez.
So range anxiety, okay, I'll reframe range anxiety in a slightly different way in Singapore. Vast majority of the country, 80% of the country lives in public housing, public apartments. In most other places, that sounds like slums, but in Singapore, that's where most of the middle class lives. Now, in public housing, that means we don't have full access to our own garage. So home charging is not readily available until the government installs it in public housing car parks. So I think that's what's going to be top of mind. One of the great benefits of EVs in most countries is you don't have to go to a gas station anymore. Superchargers are optional because you can charge at home for many people. In the case of Singapore, majority of population staying in apartments, public housing, they think about that. Okay, where do I go and charge? How do I bring it back? That's being eased as destination charging props up more. Most malls, most offices have them now. It's not that they're available, it's about the quantity now, because you now have to definitely be more thoughtful in making sure that you don't go during peak hours. So I think that's the difference in range anxiety for Singapore. It's like the ease of the convenience of charging.
So it's more about charger availability anxiety, really, rather than range anxiety as such. You've obviously, you don't own a Tesla, but you've obviously tested them on your roads. In Australia, we're starting to get an issue with reliability anxiety. You might rock up to a charger and it may not work. That's part of the problem here. Like, is that an issue with the type of chargers being installed in Singapore in public charging spots?
Saw your video, Tom, as well on covering that on the EV charger reliability. This is a global concern, more so in in US, for instance, Electrify America, that's been a big pain point for some EV owners. In Singapore, generally the reliability is decent. Like if you go in there, 70-80% of the time, the chargers will work. If you go to the big national platforms like Singapore Power, our national power company, the reliability would be even higher, let's say around 90%. Tesla superchargers, as we know from the stats, are like 99.7, 99.8%, very, very high. So that hasn't been a major issue yet because right now the number of EV chargers per EV that ratio in Singapore is relatively high. So we've got around 3,000 EV chargers, and we've got around 5,000 EVs. The International Energy Association recommends a ratio of 10 to 1. That means 1 charger to 10 EVs. We are way better than that for now until adoption rises. So we're in a comfortable sweet spot. In fact, that actually makes it even more attractive to own an EV now. Get it now before the crowds come.
That's so true. I'm sure, Rahul, you've driven around as well. That's becoming an issue, right? Lots of EVs starting to pop up in Victoria.
Yeah, definitely. I think the next year, 2 years, and even now, we're facing issues with ChargeFox. I think I've mentioned this in the past to you both personally. Just chargers not working in the area. So with more cars coming and at an affordable price point as well. That's probably the biggest concern right now is the reliability of the chargers and for them to be functioning, especially coming up to the holidays. I think a lot of people are going to be taking road trips. I'm taking a road trip to Sydney in January and hoping that some of the chargers that I'm going to access are going to be working, considering you've got a family with 2 kids, I guess, traveling. You want to make sure everything just works.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a really good stress test actually coming up over our summer, Daren, in Australia, especially on the East Coast. We've got a lot more Model Ys now, and Riz has covered recently on The Driven 60,000 Model Ys. 60,000 Teslas are now in Australia, or EVs are in Australia now.
60,000 EVs are in Australia, and about nearly 40,000 of them are Teslas.
So but there's a lot of cars now for us with our charging infrastructure. So this summer is going to be a really good test for our major arterials. Daren, I want to ask you actually, just shifting away from Tesla a little bit, you mentioned affordability. We've got the BYD Atto 3 here, which is, arguably one of the more affordable cars and good value for money. And it's launched in Singapore as well. How has that helped with EV adoption over there?
To answer that, I want to paint some unique context about Singapore first. In most countries, we've got a low-end, mid-range, high-end, and then luxury car market. In Singapore, because of the government taxes, the cheapest car in Singapore, the absolute cheapest in Singapore is 100,000 Singapore dollars or 110 Australian dollars. That's the absolute cheapest car you can buy. The worst car, the cheapest. There is effectively no low-end car market in the country. So it probably starts mid-range onwards and go up. So where the BYD comes in is the Atto 3 is considered affordable because it's about 174,000 Singapore dollars. So that's a $75,000 difference from the entry-level Model 3 or Model Y. On top of that, so the Atto 3, I think, is doing well for consumer brands, especially the tier below Teslas. They also have the E6, which is their main commuter car, ride-hailing car. So the E6 is quite popular with ride-hailing fleets, taxi fleets, commercial fleets. So that's also giving a lot of people exposure. So BYD is playing in both the commercial and also the consumer segments, whereas Tesla is entirely focused on the consumer segment right now. The implication there is BYD is doing well in Singapore. If we look at EVs, share of EV sales, I'll say Tesla is around 40%, BYD will be around 30-35%, and the remaining 30% will be all the other brands. So I'd say it's a 2-tier kind of play for the EV market in Singapore.
Okay, that's, I guess, looking at our figures from November, it's very similar here as well. BYD is now number 2 for the Atto 3s. And do you know whether BYD is bringing any other models to Singapore, like the Seal or the Dolphin?
Yes, they are bringing the Seal, their sedan, to Singapore, I believe next year as well. So a lot of people are anticipating that would be their Model 3 or the Model 3 equivalent. I think it's going to be well received. The BYD so far, from the people who have driven it, it's reliable. You've tested it in your channel as well. The main complaint on the BYD, let's say for the Atto 3, is people feel that the steering is very light. You commented on that as well, especially on Australian roads. That needs to be calibrated and adjusted.
Yep, definitely. And obviously driving around Singapore roads, not too bad. No range anxiety.
It's city road. It's not much anxiety. Country is small, and we've got the perfect climate for EVs. We don't have harsh winters. We don't have crazy hot summers. So it's a very consistent climate. It's kind of like California climate for EVs. It's the best case you can get. Whereas our friends in Norway, for instance, during the winter months, the range drops by 40%. That's a huge adjustment.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we touch on Tesla investment, Daren, I want you to list some things on your wish list for EV adoption in Singapore. What could the country and the government be doing to help it raise the bar a bit?
First, with the government, the number one ask from the government is to change the classification of that certificate of entitlement to switch it away from power rating to efficiency. Because if the government's goal is sustainability, we should reward efficiency and not power. The tension there is the government needs tax revenues. We've got very low corporate, very low individual tax in Singapore. Our capital gains tax is 0%. So every single dollar of revenue matters to the government. And the government has no incentive to change the classification structure for cars right now. Because to them, what's the big deal? By 2030, there's no new ICE car sales anyway. There's nothing that needs to be done to incentivize EV sales. And if the facts are correct, it's already 16% EV adoption today, one of the highest in Asia Pacific. Why change? Keeping the tax revenue is very important. And they know the appeal of Teslas. They know that people will spend for a Tesla. Despite the price being what it is, people are still buying Teslas. So I think that's my number one ask, if the government would change the classification to be consistent in their values or principles of sustainability. The second change is I think continue allow Tesla to operate more superchargers. So this is not widely known. Tesla doesn't have a license to open all the supercharger stations that they want in the country. They are constrained. So Tesla can only operate, they're operating in a sandbox to the government. And they can only build superchargers in private property today. So we have 9 stations in Singapore. All 9 stations are in private property in malls, in shopping malls. But if you think of the big parks in Singapore, like East Coast Park, Botanic Gardens, where you could fit in like larger supercharger stations, Tesla is not able to be there yet. So I think if the government would just open up for Tesla, and we know already globally that Tesla would eventually open up supercharger stations to all other EV brands. They are working with many of the governments, Australian government as well, to get state incentives to build the infrastructure network. And it's win-win for everyone. The uptime for supercharger network is very high, far higher than most other charging networks. So that's my second wish list. If there was a third wish list in the country is I think consider finding more ways to attract Tesla into the country, not to produce cars because it doesn't make sense producing cars here. But if we think of R&D, if we think of other future S-curve projects like Tesla bought, or even solar roofs, I think those are smaller footprint places where Singapore could be a manufacturing hub. People don't think of Singapore as manufacturing, but Hyundai is opening an EV factory in Singapore. They're building one. Dyson's global headquarters is in Singapore. Globally, all of the motors in Dyson products. So do any of you have a Dyson fan? like this one here. If you have a Dyson fan or Dyson vacuum cleaner, all the motors in the world are built in Singapore, in a factory in Jurong, because it's got amazing intellectual property protection. Then they ship the motors to Johor in Malaysia for assembly. So I think that there is a role to consider for Singapore for manufacturing, and if the government incentivizes it. The government's very business friendly. Think of it almost like the Texas of Southeast Asia. And I think that's a big opportunity.
Yeah, that's great, Daren. I think that's great ideas for the Singapore government there for sure. Riz, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, Daren, I've only seen videos on YouTube of these young billionaires in Singapore. Used to be the Lamborghini heaven. If you were in Singapore, you had a Lamborghini, and I don't know how, if you can't afford a Model 3, how you can buy Lamborghinis, but there's a lot of wealth that's created there, and it's really good to see the government allowing for those innovative projects. And I think that would be great for Tesla to be involved in some of those other products, particularly with some of the other things they want to do around mining and refining in Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia. Some of the R&D hubs could be based in Singapore. So we've got Elon, as you know, commenting and congratulating us on what we've achieved this season. So Elon's here. We made sure he was here. So listen to the suggestions from you, Daren. So we'll make it happen.
Talking about Lamborghinis, even like if we look at the supercar groups like Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Maseratis, McLarens, a lot of these owners have also started buying Model 3s and Model Ys.
Yeah.
So what happened is during the weekdays, it wouldn't make sense to send your child to school in a Lamborghini. V8s are too noisy for school environment. So they use the Tesla. They're sustainable on the weekdays, very practical, lots of space, frunk space. And on the weekends, it's to the ice fantasy land.
Jeez, yes.
I think in Australia that might be the way in 10, 20 years' time, where the ice car is the weekend hobby car on our freeways, and the green car is the car you send your kids to at school. So good point there. Daren, I just want to shift a little bit more towards investing now. You do talk about investing on your channel a lot, which is great. Good advice for someone like me who has not much idea. What makes TSLA a good bet in the long run at the moment?
In very layman terms, it's actually quite predictable and you can see it. So I'll give you an extreme example. The past couple of years, we've heard people in the finance world talk about crypto. There's a lot of promise here. But most of the times when people talk about crypto, it's about how you can earn a lot of money. But if you ask someone like, how does it benefit Tom, Riz, Rahul, Daren, or our kids? You don't really get a good consistent answer. They'll say, it's the future, money, your home ownership lease will be an NFT one day. But it's very fluffy. When you invest in Tesla, you just have to just look at the streets. My neighbor's got a Model Y. There's 2 Model Ys now. Nowadays in my block, there used to be no Teslas. Now I see it was 1, I was super excited. There was 2, now there's 3 in my car park below. And the number continues growing. So I just think this company is getting more users. They only have a 3% share of the total market. 3% of all cars in the world are EVs. There's huge headroom. They seem to be making money selling these cars. Apart from BYD and Tesla, no one else makes profit selling EVs. And they seem to be able to produce a lot of them. Is the CEO very eccentric? Yes. So people say Elon Musk is the biggest risk investing in Tesla. But if there was no Elon Musk, Tesla stock price today would be 0. Tesla stock price would be 0 today if there was no Elon Musk. So there's 2 ways to see it. And so I think of it as actually a good long-term risk-reward return. It's a freaking roller coaster in the short term. Literally anything could happen. The things that we don't imagine can happen. That's part of the charm for some people, but that's a heart attack for many people as well.
Yeah, well said there, Daren. Without Elon, there is no Tesla. That's so true. Look, with the caveat that this is not professional or financial advice, seek your own. This is for entertainment purposes only. Daren, is now a good time to get some TSLA in your pocket?
I think of this as this is a good decade to think about it. I think of it like Apple in the early 2000s. What happened to Apple early 2000s? Steve Jobs came back, the iPod was released, the new iMacs were well received, stock price went up by 5 to 10 times. In the early 2000s, you ask most investors, should you still buy more Apple stock? People will be like, no, that's insane. They've already reached the zenith. Like Steve Jobs has done everything already. Then you waited a couple more years, 2007, they launched the iPhone. Even when Steve Jobs passed away, Tim Cook took over, another disaster. What has happened since then? Apple stock prices went up 14 times since the supposed peak when Steve Jobs launched the iPods. So when I think about how is a company executing, I think that it's a good decade. This decade for Tesla is like Apple's last decade in the 2000s because they've clearly committed on. The good thing with Tesla is that they're a little bit more transparent on their product pipeline. Apple, you got to guess. But nowadays, with the company being so big, it's leaked already. Like Apple's biggest product launch next year is going to be their mixed reality device, AR and VR. Apple is usually one of the last to enter a market, but when they do, they are the first to do it well. Smartwatches have been around for a long time, but Apple Watch really made it mainstream. Wireless earphones have been long for a long time. But AirPods, at first people laughed at it, so silly, long stick. But nowadays you can't go to any suburb street in Melbourne, Sydney, Singapore without seeing AirPods sticking out all around us. So I think of Tesla this decade, like that. Like, what are the opportunities? They are making cars, but they're also recognizing that their cars are smart. Each car has 8 cameras, sensors. Some of the FSD beta testers, they post on Twitter, they're uploading like gigabytes of data back to Tesla. Gigabytes of data back. If you drive a Nissan or Volkswagen, how much data do they get back from us? Correct. Now, and if they have a team that's making use of their data, we've seen how cool machine learning is. The chatbot from OpenAI, if you go to chat.openai.com, it's mind-blowing. Imagine what Tesla could do with the same thing for autonomous driving. So that headroom, that opportunity is substantial. It comes with also substantial risk because China is a huge car market and a huge manufacturing hub. And that is why the quicker Berlin and Austin ramps up, the quicker they announce 1 or 2 more gigafactories in other markets, whether it's Indonesia, in Canada, in UK, in South Korea, that reduces the concentration risk, that reduces the political risk from China. And as we know, Tesla is moving away from nickel, going to new kinds of battery technology. Canada has a lot of raw materials that's suitable for the next generation of Teslas, the third generation, the robotaxi Teslas, where it's supposed to be around $30,000. So if we just look at all the publicly announced plans, Elon Musk has consistently been late, but he has consistently delivered. He said, we turned the impossible to the late. We don't have Steve Jobs today, so I think of Elon Musk as the next generation of entrepreneurs for our time. I really love Steve Jobs. Tangent here. I really love Steve Jobs because he made the small very big. He'll be like, I'm going to take out this device from my pocket, 1,000 songs in your pocket, and everyone just goes insane, like reality distortion feel. Elon is great at making the big very small. Nowadays, who very few of us would actually bother to go to a SpaceX live stream and see the rocket land back. We'd be like, what's the big deal? We've seen it hundreds of times. Can you imagine saying that 15 years ago or even 10 years ago? Pretty insane.
Yeah, very well said. And you make a good point. For a product to be successful, memorable and reliable. And you've said that very well with the AirPods and all sorts of things. Although I must say, I've seen people with AirPods with like a string attachment. I mean, why not just get headphones, right? Sorry,
exactly.
Just a tangent there. Daren, I want to ask you really quickly. Thoughts on the Apple car? We saw a hint of it this week in the news.
Yeah.
Will that come to fruition?
The news has said that it's being delayed. It's going to 26 now. I think for us, what's more important and more realistic for Apple is the line of sight for Apple is to become the operating system of cars, to be the OS of cars. You don't need to own the hardware. So Apple could take like an OS approach. That means let the car manufacturers build the cars, and the high margin comes into Apple, as we've seen in the WWDC earlier this year, a couple of months ago. They're actually integrating a lot more deeply into the car systems, like whether it's fuel gauge for ICE cars, all the telemetry for cars, a lot more integration beyond just the entertainment interface. It's really your core car functions that's integrating with. It could really totally replace the front end of a car. Car companies are going to be very resistant. But as what companies like Volkswagen has found, building software is not just a matter of putting money and hiring people. We've seen car companies say we have 15,000 software engineers, but what do we have to show for it? It's delays, money, and it hasn't got built. It's kind of like building Starship versus the other government rockets in the US, like the SLS rockets. It's not just about money. I think it's also about the right culture. Apple has a great software culture, and I think that's going to be their core strength, because they don't have a great hardware culture now. They're not manufacturing more things in-house. It's all done externally through Foxconn. They outsource. And some believe that the vertical integration, building all the car parts together, owning the supply chain, is a core competitive advantage. The only 2 companies that are profitable in EVs do that. BYD, vertically integrated, and Tesla, vertically integrated. If Apple is taking a Foxconn approach to cars, it's hard to see how, if Foxconn could do it for Apple, why won't they just make the same products for other companies? That's my take. How about the rest of you? Curious to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, for me, it makes a lot of sense, Darren. I've talked about this many times with Riz as well. And Rahul, I think software at the moment is king. If you can, master the software for your EV the way Tesla is doing, and BYD to a certain extent, then you're winning the race. Gentlemen, thoughts?
I think, like software is what's lacking in a lot of these cars. Volkswagen Group with Porsche Macan, some of the, that's going to be, one of their best selling electric vehicles if they can make it. But they can't get it on the road because the software just doesn't work. There is issues everywhere globally with them trying to do it. And as you said, Darren, you can have the most amount of money, throw it against the wall, get average software engineers because the best ones don't care about how much money you throw at them. They want to work at Tesla. So it's that culture of innovation. And sometimes we speak about on the live streams around why does Tesla take the Cybertruck out to these unis and all of these other places where there's young people that are potentially looking for their next job or then their first job. So they go to the smartest people, showcase what they can build. Even if it's a prototype, like public won't see it, but these students will see them because they want to attract that talent and have less but do more with it. So yeah, Tesla's like the way they're collecting data, that vertical integration piece, the software that underpins everything, and now in all of their products, the semi launch last week just blew us away as to how much of the car stuff they're using in semi and then Optimus and all the other products coming up. So it's really exciting decade, and hopefully we can get some. I mean, I can get some tips from you as well, Darren, and invest in the stock as well.
What's your take, Rahul?
Oh, look, I'm a consumer. I just love the fact that every single year we get the holiday release on the software side with Tesla, which is a fun element for the kids and for us adults as well who've never grown up, I guess. But yeah, just having a hardware car, but which in 5 years' time will have the latest software, which means you're pretty much driving the brand new car. Whereas I think it was Mercedes, Riz and Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong. Apparently, if you wanted extra acceleration, you had to pay $10,000 or something additional for that.
Merc.
Like what? I think Tesla have just figured out, what attracts consumers, just like you mentioned about Apple. So yeah, I just do not see any other product there in that EV market. Obviously, you pay a premium for it in Singapore and in Australia and in other markets as well globally, but that's the price you pay for the top of the range product. Yeah.
All right, well, let's go through some of our regular segments now. And Darren, if you wouldn't mind joining us for these, we're going to whip through some of the charts and news articles that we often go through. So let's do that right now. And by the way, Darren's going to keep joining us. So if you're watching live, leave him a question or comment. We'll put them up as we go along if there's anything for Darren. All right, so let's have a look at some new EV sales in Australia. So we were mentioning earlier about the 60,000 EVs over the last 10 years. Riz, take it away.
So yeah, we've surpassed 60,000 EVs now as part of the fleet, and we sort of started just under 35,000 in the beginning of 2022, and we're going to get close to 70,000. So basically double the amount of EV fleet we have in this 1 year alone, and next year is going to be even bigger as there's new tax incentives and other things to encourage EV adoption, and then people will see more of them on the road, and that's what they want. So nobody wants to go to a petrol station and fill one up. So that's really cool to see. Teslas are about to hit 40,000 in the fleet as well. So roughly 2/3 are going to be Teslas. Obviously, the numbers would come down comparatively as BYD and other manufacturers bring a lot more cars in. So yeah, really good to see over 60,000 EVs on the road now.
Yeah, that's right, Riz. And Tesla is still the driving force behind our adoption here in Australia. But as you can see with this next slide, which is Riz's article from The Driven, which was mentioned by Sawyer Merritt. So well done, Riz, on that.
Oh.
We can see BYD Atto 3 is now number 2 in November 2022 for Australia.
Yeah, this is the first month the BYD is actually reporting these figures through FCAI, Federal Chamber of Automotive, I think it is, and they collate all the brands and how many cars they sell. In the EV segment, there were just over 4,700 cars that were sold in the month of November. And out of them, as you can see, Teslas make, just under half the amount of cars that were delivered. And BYD's up there as number 2 best-selling car with the Atto 3. So yeah, good to see a new player on the board, and we'll see a lot more from them over the coming months.
Yeah, and this slide, which is also from Riz, breaks it down even better here. You can see Tesla's commanding market share at the moment, but as Riz said, BYD Atto 3 is one to look out for next year and beyond. I'm a bit surprised by some of the other cars here, like Polestar 2. I would have thought there'd be more deliveries by now. Hopefully more next year.
Yeah, so Polestar's had challenges earlier in the year, and for about, I think last October and November is when their deliveries have started to pick up again, over 200. Maybe they aren't through all the supply chain challenges, because Volvo, even though the C40 is there just above Polestar, that's its second month. And I think in total they have sold or delivered about 280 of them in Australia so far. So what happened to the XC40, which has been around for a while, and we can't even see it on the chart, so they're not even sending any, and that shares the platform with Polestar as well. So it's they're having a bit of a tough time, but I think next year things might change. And the other thing as well is Polestar is priced, nearly at a Tesla Model 3 level. So the demand for Teslas, we've sort of spoken about it on the channel, is starting to come down a little bit in Australia, particularly for Model 3s. So that same effect is probably multiplied with Polestar. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Hopefully next year they can kick things off again and have some larger sales as we sort of get into sort of May, June of next year.
Yeah, as we keep mentioning, the Chinese brands are certainly providing a lot of competition, and it will continue to do so. So it will be interesting to watch in the next few years between the European traditional brands and the Chinese auto EV brands. Now on to one of my favorite segments of the show, which is EV charging eye candy. So Daren, we look at some nice examples of DC charging installations around the world, and we haven't found anyone from Singapore yet. So if you see any, email me later on. But this next one is actually, well, it's not quite an EV charger. It's actually a battery swap charger from Neo. This is their very first one in Europe, in the Netherlands. And it's a beautiful installation. It's almost like a drop-in, like container. Hopefully it's easy enough to replicate around Europe. Looks really good. I like the Neo too. What do you think of that, gents? Nice looking car?
Very sleek.
Yep, agreed.
Looks solid.
Yeah, nice looking sedan, for sure. This one is, we've been following this charging brand for a while. This is from France, all across Europe really, but I think that's a Hyper. What's the brand name of this charger?
I think these are the hypercharger units. We're supposed to get them in Australia, and we haven't yet so far, but they seem to be supplying to a lot of new installs. Must be reliable, given the companies like Fastnet that seem to be installing, dozens of them at each site, seem to rely on them. So yeah, good to see, and hopefully we see more of these in Australia as well.
Yep. And we touched on memorable for a product. This sort of canopy with the solar panels on top. It's very memorable. Like, I recognize that straight away as a Fastnet. So yeah, there's a tip for anyone.
Branding.
Sorry, Darren?
It's great branding.
Great branding.
And that's one thing like Apple does really well. Like, why does it still keep a notch on top of the phone so that you can tell it's an iPhone? Why do their iMacs have that chin at the bottom? they could remove the chin, but they choose not to, so that everyone could tell instantly that's an Apple product. One feedback on some of the Tesla supercharger stations, especially in the US, they look quite generic with the solar roof. I think if they think of some unique design element, or I think in the earlier episode you commented, like, shouldn't the charging stations light up, like show a little bit of the Tesla glow?
Yep, exactly. Something memorable, right? Just to differentiate it from the others. This next one's quite nice. I like this one. This is from France as well. A few sort of wood elements in that station. I would love to see more good-looking stations here in Australia, and also, you know, with amenities implemented as well associated with these chargers. So it's a nice place to stop. Because to be fair, we are charging and stopping longer than you would at a petrol station. So it might as well be a comfortable stop.
I believe Lidl is a supermarket chain as well. So this may be connected to a supermarket in France. I think Rahul mentioned earlier today that where they've got the signage of how much, each charger costs. That's quite cool as well. We need more of that. We need to make it apparent that there is EV charging here. And signage is something that we don't do very well in Australia at the moment, Daren. Half the time we're driving around trying to find this one or two chargers that may or may not be working. But yeah, that's great signage.
Well, it makes good content for me, Riz, because I can show people where they are. My YouTube channel. Drive here, drive there. Just back on this charging station here. Look at that. That looks beautiful, right? It's all undercover. That's one bugbear of mine. I think these should be undercover, honestly, away from the elements. So, yep. Yeah, it looks good there. Model 3 charging away. Let's have a look at the next segment, which is Spotted. So we put up any cars that we see that are interesting at the moment. So this was posted from Tom Baker from Chasing Cars. Volkswagen ID Buzz electric van is in Sydney. Details for Australia coming next week. But for now, some pictures of this rad bay leaf green candy white Pro 77 kilowatt hour spec. Bring back the combi. Here it is.
I think they'll probably be charging Singapore prices for these in Australia as well. I think we'll probably be seeing this for $150,000, given the nostalgia behind the combi van and stuff. So anyway, good to see it here, and maybe Volkswagen will deliver these before they deliver any other cars, and hopefully the software is working.
Hey Daren, I've seen a few vans in Singapore. That's quite popular, right? The people mover segment.
Vans. Yeah, there are a lot of vans because it's a big logistic network. We are one of the world's busiest ports as well, so a lot is moving. And BYD has their commercial vans in Singapore as well. I'm not sure if they have the same BYD EV vans in Australia.
Not really.
We've got a couple.
Yeah.
We've got a couple. They bought a small batch in. I think they're called the T3s.
Yes.
And yeah, so they bought a couple of them in, just like they bought a couple of E6 people movers as well. So there's a couple running around, but yeah, no, they stopped that, and maybe the next generation of vehicles would be those people movers and those vans, because we do need to do a lot more in that freight and logistics sector to help them decarbonize and electrify as well.
Yeah. I think one segment is missing, and we thought like the big MPVs, like for large family vehicles. There are no good EV options there yet that I'm aware of, at least for Singapore.
Yeah, we did cover recently on the channel the LDV bringing out their MIFA 9, the E-Deliver 9. Mercedes launched the EQV here in Australia, so hopefully it's starting to fill out, but they're still a bit pricey, I think, relatively speaking. So we'll keep an eye on them for sure. I wouldn't mind seeing an electric Kia Carnival. That's the highest selling people mover in Australia. That'll sell well. Let's talk about EV events. Of course, a quick plug for the Fully Charged Live in March 2022, featuring Robert Llewellyn, of course, whom we had on the channel. So if you want to meet myself, Riz, and Rahul, and maybe even Daren maybe pop down to Sydney. Maybe no, I shouldn't speak for him, but yeah, come down to come down to Sydney for this event in March 2022. Okay, let's go through some Tesla news now. So, so as we mentioned earlier, the Tesla Semi was delivered last week. Look at those pictures there. So PepsiCo and Frito-Lay were the first customers. And I think we saw a pic as well of the Tesla the Tesla Semi rendered as a motorhome too. So yeah, Google that if you haven't seen that yet. It looks pretty funky.
Very nice render.
Yeah.
In like gloss black.
Yes. And then this popped up today on my feed. Tesla says it's adding radar back into its cars next month amid self-driving suite concerns. Interesting. I wonder if those cars who are camera only now, will there be a retrofit in the future?
That's going to be the number one question. The article says that if they add radar, it's going to be high resolution radar. So it's not going to be the same radar that we find in most cars out there. It's double the range of the old radars. And I think Elon Musk was saying a couple of months ago that when someone asked him about vision, he said, yeah, pure vision is better than vision radar today. But if there was high res radar, that with vision could be a better solution.
My question is, are sensors gone for good?
Good question. For now, thankfully, all Giga Shanghai still have ultrasonic sensors.
Okay, good. And Soy Merit again tweeted about Tesla selling 100,000 vehicles in China. He didn't really quite say the BYDs actually sold 220,000, but that includes all vehicles, right? Plug-ins and electric.
Correct.
Whereas Tesla's is all EVs.
I was doing a recent calculation. So like the run rate of EV production right now is 150,000 per month for Tesla and 100,000 per month for BYD. So BYD is catching up really quickly, but Tesla is still leading from a production standpoint.
Yep. But interesting times ahead for sure. And we've got some trends from Riz here on the next slide here for Tesla production in Shanghai.
Yeah, so they sold around 100,000 vehicles. That included those that were produced and those that were sitting in parking lots after they had produced them in the previous month. So it would be interesting to get that breakdown for what they actually produced during the month. I'm expecting around 85,000, but I guess we'll get that breakdown if it hasn't already been released yet. So yeah, worth watching this space. And in December this month, majority of the production will be for local Chinese market only. So if you buy a Tesla in China this month, there's a whole lot of incentives to do so, and you'll get it delivered in a couple of weeks' time before New Year.
And that's also a big call-out because the government would stop the EV tax incentive at the end of this year, 31st December.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I think we also covered that if you buy one now, I think they'll honor that, even if it's delivered after. So. I also want to shout out to Gaffer, who one of our members. Yes, the EV DC chargers open in Wollongong. But yeah, it's great to see finally some more DC chargers in Wollongong. They've got a huge population down there, so yeah, we definitely need more chargers down that way. So great news for you, Gaffer and Nash, and anyone else from the Wollongong area. Fantastic. And also, we talked about the holiday update as well. So here is TeslaScope's tweet about what we can expect this month. I guess they always tend to release this after Christmas, so late December. We can expect Apple Music, improved music play, you can move around, MyQ Garage support, remote light show scheduling, remote emissions mode, new games, and more. I don't know how many of these will be coming to Australia, but it'll be interesting to see later in 2022.
TeslaScope was also just sharing recently that they found a line of code on Steam that says "is Tesla." That means Steam should be coming to Tesla sooner rather than later.
Nice.
We saw that in the original Model S plaids when they released them, that they were running, I think, Cyberpunk or something on one of the screens. They weren't running it, but that was what was in that image. So maybe that's what they're aiming for, to run Steam and other gaming sort of solutions off the back of that with the updated new infotainment units and stuff. So cool to see.
I really think that the opportunity here is like a side tangent. If Apple really release a car, I think what would be cool with it is it would be quite modern. Like example, if you want to upgrade your console, just buy a new iPad, plug in your car, boom, there you go, M5 chip.
Yeah, so true, right? So true. That's where Apple should be heading. Has anybody got the internal camera update yet? Where you can sneak peek what's happening inside when it's parked?
Not yet.
All right, that'll be interesting. Make for
That's
some
going to be
funky.
used for Zoom as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Video call as you drive. And yes, the next one is about the Model 3 launching in Thailand. I believe, Daren, you were there recently too.
I was not physically there. I'm going to Chiang Mai next month, so not in Bangkok, Chiang Mai. And I heard that Tesla John is nearby as well. I'll try to reach out to him and see if he's open to a meetup. But it's well due. Thailand is definitely by far the best market for Tesla to launch after Singapore and Southeast Asia. And the results have proven itself. I think Ikerbot also shared after this as well. They already have 4,000 orders. They're delivering 1,500 Teslas in February.
Wow. That's amazing. That's almost all the Teslas in Singapore in one shot.
In 1 month, exactly in 1 month.
It's so true. We often say Thailand's the Detroit of Southeast Asia, right? So that's where the cars are being built now. It's great to see. And Tesla has applied for some permits for some temporary housing around Fremont while major works are undertaken. Interesting. Single castings for Model 3, maybe, for next year? Watch this space.
Yes, because Elon Musk has said that it's very hard to change the engines of a plane that's flying. And so the milestone to upgrade Model 3 was when Model Y outsold Model 3 globally, which has happened already in practically every market. And so now and also it's more competitive in the sedan space. Piper Sandler released like a EV research showing that the Model Y is far ahead any other EV in SUV category. Not just EV, but any SUV, full stop. But for the Model 3 in the sedan category, I think they need a lot more differentiation now. So I think this provides opportunity not just for single casting, but to also upgrade the exterior, the features, the screens on the Model 3. Maybe even figure out a way if they could finally bring the HEPA filter that the Model Y has into it.
Yeah, new features, right, for next year and beyond. So we shall see. Hopefully, they maybe transfer across to Shanghai as well. Some of these features. We shall see. Let's touch on some BYD news now, just briefly. So there we go. Some more worldwide growth trends for BYD.
Yeah, so they seem to be doing pretty well. It's just growth, and they're opening plants and shipping to more markets now as well. Out of those 230 odd thousand that they have produced in November, just over 100,000 of them were pure EVs, and the others were plug-in hybrids. So it's good to see. Now, I think I wouldn't call this breaking news, but there is news tonight that BYD prices are going up in Australia. So the Atto 3 has gone up by $3,000 on the standard range and the extended range version. So now extended range is around 51,000 before on-road costs. So I tried to verify that before the show, but their site crashed. So I don't know what's happening. Having said that,
Trying to get all the orders in before the price update.
that's and the wait time is around May, June at the moment if you place a new order. So be interesting to see how that pans out. But yeah, so I think the standard range is around 47 to 48,000 Australian dollars plus on-road costs, and the extended range now starts at 51,000 plus on-roads.
Yeah, I think that was always inevitable, Riz, wasn't it? We saw price rises in other markets, so I think the local distributor here probably wanted to get them delivered first, and then I think a price rise was on the cards.
Well, and the experience centers and those, the agreement that I think they had in the beginning would allude to that surely they couldn't have been making too much money selling them at that price. Yeah. Given it was a ground up EV with that sort of range and all the tech features that it has. So now they've got, the market share, and they've got a lot of orders. So yeah, and also things are just getting, more and more expensive, as we can see just in general with inflation. So it's we were expecting it. New Zealand had a price increase a couple of weeks ago, and I think they've just had another one as well. So yeah, signs of the time. But yeah, BYD Atto 3 is a little bit more expensive. But if MGZS was doing all right in sales, then they may not have increased prices as quickly. So the MGZS is, from what I can see so far, it's just the early adopters that are getting them, and after that there'll be a fair bit of stock laying around for the new ZS EV if you're in the market for a entry-level EV SUV.
Yep. They're still the cheapest in Australia.
Mhm.
Let's have a look at the BYD Seal. Look at that. There's a nice looking launch there.
That was a big event in Thailand, I believe. So it's great to see that the EV market's developing so quickly in Thailand, and hopefully that would mean more right-hand drive plants there for markets like ours. So yeah, good to see, and maybe we'll get to see the Seal here next year as well.
Fingers crossed. It's nothing like seeing cars under lights, I gotta say. Just amazing. Looks so good. Let's whisk around other EV news. Looks like the EV Amarok, the very popular VW Amarok Ute electrified, will be coming second half of the decade. Second half of the decade. That's a long way away, actually. I thought it was second half of the year. Is that right, Behyad? And confirmed. I mean, confirmed is such a strong word. Jeez. That's a long way to come, though, isn't it, guys? Second half of the decade.
That could be as far as 8 years from now.
True.
The
VW.
Amarok has been in Australia since 2009, and we are in 2022, nearly in 23, and we're talking about the Amarok coming here in 2025. I think Volkswagen has probably the same EV strategy managers for Australia as Toyota does, because we're not really getting any cars from either one of them yet, apart from that ID Buzz that we've seen in Sydney, but there's just nothing else on the horizon. The ID series will be launching next year, but this is basically a non-news event. I'm not sure why I put it out there at this stage.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, VW is showing signs of seriousness. They're investing some money in the plant in Germany. Most of it's being spent on the electric ID3 model. So, I don't know. Signs are there. Hopefully we'll see them come to Australia soon.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to put a slide here for Toe to watch. They are finally sort of semi-serious. There's a target now in Europe, 50% EVs by 20, I want to say 2030. I think it's 2030 from the article we covered. So, yeah, 5 new BZ models being launched as well. We did cover this in a previous episode too, so check that out. But that's it from us tonight, gents. Daren, I want to thank you once again for all your knowledge and your insights from a Singapore perspective.
Happy to be here. It was a fun discussion. I'm honored to be here the first time and also in your last live stream of 2022.
And we promise it won't be the last time, Daren. We'll get you back, that's for sure. Now, Darren's got a great YouTube channel. He talks about all things Teslas, renewable energy, EVs, Tesla investments. So I will link that into the video description below. So make sure you check that out. He's done really well over the last year or so. Great content and super informative like he was tonight too. So check that out. And once again, I want to thank our 2 regular guests, Riz and Rahul. Thank you, gentlemen. You guys have been the backbone of the show. Riz with your charts, Rahul with your articles that you send to me every now and then throughout the week. Without you two, this show could not happen. So thank you for all your efforts in 2022.
Thanks, Tom, for having us. And yeah, thanks, Rahul, for everything as well. This whole season's been really good. We've all had good things learning off each other and also having a bit of a laugh as we go along. And and thanks, Daren, for sharing what's happening in Singapore. Can't wait to get up there and check it out myself.
Hosting for some chili crab.
Oh,
You got it.
so hungry.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, Tom and Riz. Again, thank you very much for having me on. I hope all your viewers, have a great holiday season. Daren, great to have you on tonight. We look forward to having you again in 2023 again at some stage in the future.
Happy to be back. Hopefully everyone enjoys their Christmas present or holiday present from Tesla in the coming weeks.
Yeah, very well said, Daren, and thank you once again. And thank you to all the live viewers who've been watching and commenting throughout the year too. You guys are phenomenal. You are what makes this show. And I can't wait to start again in 2023. It's going to be a great year in Australia for EVs. I can just feel it. I can feel the change, the shift, the momentum changing. Going to see a lot of models come into Australia. So exciting times ahead. All right, everyone. We'll have a great holiday season. Enjoy it with your friends and family, and I'll see you in the new year, nice and fresh. Take care, everyone, and as always, happy charging.